Somewhere right now, in a small apartment or a quiet house on an ordinary street, someone is doing something that will completely change the direction of their life. And the strange part, nobody around them has noticed yet. Not their family, not their coworkers, not even the person themselves fully realizes what's happening. Because the thing that separates an ordinary life from an extraordinary one is almost never a single dramatic moment. It's not a lottery ticket, a lucky break, or a miracle phone call. It's something far quieter and far more available to every single one of us, no matter where we're starting from. It's what you do in the small, unremarkable hours of an average Tuesday. Before we go any further, if you believe in the power of daily growth, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because we're about to walk through 7 habits that have shown up again and again in the lives of people who went from forgettable to unforgettable. And I promise you, none of them require money you don't have, talent you weren't born with, or permission from anyone else. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see your own daily routine in a completely different light. For decades, people who study human achievement have circled around the same conclusion. It isn't intelligence that separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. It isn't luck, and it isn't even opportunity. Because plenty of naturally gifted, well-connected people go nowhere, while plenty of people with nothing behind them build remarkable lives. What separates them is something almost embarrassingly simple: a small number of habits, repeated with quiet consistency, day after day. For years, Jim Rohn, one of the most respected voices in personal development, put it in a way that has stuck with millions of people since. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. Read that again, because it's the whole idea in a single sentence. Not one giant leap, not one perfect plan. Just a handful of small, repeatable choices, made so consistently that they eventually become who you are. Today we're going to break down 7 of those habits. Not vague ideas, but specific, repeatable actions that ordinary people have used to build extraordinary lives. We'll look at where they show up, why they work, on a psychological level, and, most importantly, how you can start building them into your own life starting today. Not next Monday, not next year. Today, let's start with the first habit, and it might be the single biggest predictor of long-term success there is: the habit of daily learning. Think about the way most people treat their education. They finish school, they get a diploma or a degree, and in their minds, the learning phase of life is officially over. From that point forward, they coast on what they already know. But here's the truth: nobody tells you in school, the moment you stop learning is the moment you stop growing. And the moment you stop growing is the moment the world quietly starts passing you by. The people who build extraordinary lives never accept that their education ended. They read, they listen, they ask questions. They treat every single day as a chance to add one more piece to their understanding of the world. Picture 2 people starting their careers at the exact same company, on the exact same day, with the exact same job title. One of them spends their evenings watching television, scrolling on their phone, letting their mind go quiet after a long day. The other spends just 20 or 30 minutes reading something useful, listening to an educational podcast on their commute, or studying a skill that's relevant to where they want to go. On day 1, there's no visible difference between them. On day 30, still barely noticeable. But fast forward 5 years, and the gap between these 2 people isn't a gap anymore. It's a canyon. The one who kept learning has quietly become the expert in the room, the person others turn to for advice, the one who gets offered the promotion because they were already prepared for it before it was even announced. This is the quiet, compounding power of daily learning. It doesn't feel like much in the moment. There's no applause for reading 20 pages of a book or watching one educational video. But knowledge stacks. It builds on itself. And one day you wake up and realize you know things. You can do things. You understand things that most people around you simply don't. Not because you're smarter than them, but because you never stopped feeding your mind. The second habit works hand in hand with the first, and it's this. Extraordinary people write their goals down, and they revisit them constantly. This sounds almost too simple to matter, and that's exactly why so many people skip right past it. Here's what most people do instead. They have a vague wish floating around in the back of their mind. Something like, I want to be successful, or I want to get in better shape, or I want to build a better life for my family. These are nice sentiments, but they're not goals. They're daydreams, because a daydream has no shape, no deadline, and no plan attached to it. It's incredibly easy to abandon a daydream because you never really committed to it in the first place. Now, compare that to someone who sits down, takes 15 minutes, and writes out exactly what they want by when they want it and what steps it's going to take to get there. Suddenly, that vague wish has a shape. It has a deadline. It has a path. And something interesting happens once a goal is written down and looked at regularly. Your brain starts quietly working on it in the background, even when you're not actively thinking about it. You start noticing opportunities you would have walked right past before. You start making small decisions that align with where you're trying to go almost without realizing it. There's a story that gets told, often in business circles, about a young salesman who was struggling badly in his first year. He was working just as hard as everyone else on his team, showing up early, staying late, making his calls, but he was falling behind. One day, a mentor asked him a simple question. What exactly are you trying to achieve and by when? The young man didn't have a clear answer. So the mentor had him sit down right there and write out a specific number, a specific date, and a specific plan for how he was going to hit it. Nothing else about his effort changed. He didn't suddenly work harder because he was already working hard. What changed was his focus. Every single day, his actions were now pointed at something specific instead of scattered in a dozen directions. Within a year, he wasn't just meeting his goals. He was one of the top performers in his entire company. The goal itself didn't do the work, but it gave his effort a direction. And direction is often the missing piece between busy and productive. That brings us to the third habit. And this might be the toughest one to build, but it's the one that makes every other habit on this list actually stick. Daily discipline. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Motivation is unreliable. It shows up when it feels like it, and it disappears the moment things get difficult, boring, or uncomfortable, which, if we're being honest, describes most of the real work required to build anything meaningful. If you're only taking action on the days you feel inspired, you're going to end up with a very inconsistent, very fragile foundation. Discipline is what shows up when motivation doesn't. It's doing the work anyway, even when you don't feel like it, even when nobody's watching, even when the results aren't visible yet. And here's the good news. Discipline isn't some rare personality trait that only a lucky few are born with. It's a skill, and like any skill, it strengthens with use. The first time you make yourself do something you don't feel like doing, it's hard. The 10th time, it's a little easier. The 100th time, it's simply part of who you are. It's just what you do, without the internal argument you used to have with yourself every single time. One of the most reliable ways to build this kind of discipline is through small, almost laughably tiny commitments. Not, I'm going to completely transform my life starting tomorrow. Because that kind of dramatic promise almost always collapses within a week. Instead, something like, I'm going to write for 10 minutes every day, or I'm going to walk for 15 minutes every morning, no matter what. It sounds too small to matter. And that's exactly the point. When the commitment is small enough that you truly have no excuse to skip it, you remove the friction that normally kills consistency. And once that tiny habit becomes automatic, once it no longer requires willpower because it's simply part of your routine, you can build the next one on top of it. This is how ordinary people end up with extraordinary results, not through one heroic burst of effort, but through the quiet accumulation of small disciplined choices, repeated so many times that they stop feeling like effort at all. Now let's talk about the fourth habit, and it's one that almost everyone claims to understand, but very few people actually practice. Guarding your time like it's the valuable resource it actually is. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Every person on this planet, no matter how wealthy, how successful, how powerful, gets exactly the same 24 hours in a day. Nobody gets extra. The difference between someone who builds an extraordinary life and someone who doesn't often comes down to how deliberately they protect those 24 hours from being quietly stolen away, hour, by things that don't actually matter to them. Think about how easily a day disappears. You check your phone for what feels like 2 minutes, and 45 minutes later, you're still scrolling. You agreed to a meeting that could have been an email, or a conversation that drains your energy without giving anything back. None of these things feel significant in the moment. But time doesn't announce when it's being wasted. It just quietly slips away, and it never comes back. People who build extraordinary lives treat their time with a kind of respect that might look almost stubborn to outsiders. They protect their mornings for the work that matters most. They learn to say no to things that don't align with where they're trying to go, even when saying no feels uncomfortable. They plan their days instead of letting their days happen to them. This doesn't mean living a joyless, overscheduled existence with no room for rest or fun. In fact, real rest has to be planned for too, because burnout will derail you just as fast as distraction will. It simply means being intentional. At the start of each day, or better yet the night before, taking a few minutes to decide what actually matters and protecting that time fiercely. It's a small shift, but over months and years, it's the difference between a life that drifted and a life that was built on purpose. The fifth habit might be the one with the widest ripple effect of all. Guarding your attitude every single day. This one gets dismissed a lot because it sounds soft, almost like a throwaway piece of advice you'd see on a poster in a waiting room. But think about what your attitude actually controls. It shapes how you interpret setbacks. It shapes how people respond to you. It shapes whether you see a closed door as the end of the road or simply a sign to look for a different one. Two people can experience the exact same setback, the exact same rejection, the exact same bad morning, and walk away with completely different outcomes purely based on how they chose to interpret it. One person lets it confirm every doubt they already had about themselves. The other treats it as information, adjusts course, and keeps moving forward. It's the same event, but two entirely different futures branch off from it, and the only variable is attitude. Here's what's important to understand. A good attitude isn't about pretending everything is fine when it isn't, and it isn't about ignoring real problems. It's about consistently choosing to look for what's still possible instead of getting stuck on what went wrong. And just like discipline, this is trainable. It starts small, catching yourself in a moment of complaint and asking, is there another way to see this? Choosing deliberately to speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you care about, instead of the harsh inner critic so many of us default to. People are drawn toward those with a steady, resilient attitude, almost like a magnet. They want to work with them, learn from them, support them, and doors open for the people others want to help. That's not a coincidence. It's the natural result of consistently choosing to show up with the kind of energy people want to be around. Which leads us to the sixth habit, one that might sound simple, but is scientifically tied to some of the biggest shifts in people's lives. Practicing gratitude every single day. It's easy to dismiss gratitude as a soft, feel-good idea with no real substance behind it. But researchers who study human well-being have found something remarkable. People who make a consistent habit of noticing and naming what they're grateful for, even something as small as a good cup of coffee or a supportive friend, tend to report significantly higher levels of resilience, motivation, and even physical health than people who don't. Why would something so small have such a big effect because your brain has limited attention. And whatever you consistently point that attention toward becomes the lens through which you see your entire life. If you spend your days scanning for what's wrong, what's missing, what hasn't happened yet, that's exactly what you'll keep finding because you've trained your mind to look for it. But if you build a daily habit of noticing what's already good, your brain starts finding evidence for that instead. This isn't about ignoring real problems or pretending your life is perfect when it isn't. It's about balance. It's about making sure that alongside the very real challenges you're facing, you're also acknowledging the very real good that already exists. There's something almost paradoxical about gratitude, too. The people who are the most consistently thankful for what they already have tend to be the ones who end up attracting more good into their lives. Not because gratitude is some kind of magic, but because a grateful mindset makes you more generous, more patient, more pleasant to be around, and more resilient when things get hard, all of which quietly compound into better relationships, better opportunities, and a better overall trajectory over time. And now, the seventh habit, the one that ties every single other habit together, and honestly, might be the most overlooked of them all, the habit of working quietly and letting your results speak instead of your announcements. Here's something worth thinking about. There's a strange trap that a lot of ambitious people fall into. The moment they get excited about a new goal, a new project, a new version of themselves they're working toward, their first instinct is to tell everyone. And on the surface, that feels harmless, even helpful. It feels like accountability. But here's what actually tends to happen. The moment you announce a plan out loud and receive that first wave of encouragement, of nods and smiles and social approval, something happens in your brain that mimics the feeling of actual accomplishment, even though you haven't done anything yet. That premature sense of reward can quietly deflate the urgency you need to actually follow through. Meanwhile, every time you talk about the plan instead of working on it, you're spending energy on explanation instead of execution. Contrast that with the alternative, quietly getting to work, not because your plans are secretive, but because you understand that your focus and your energy are limited resources. And every ounce spent explaining yourself to others is an ounce not spent building the thing you actually set out to build. The people who build extraordinary lives tend to share a quiet confidence that doesn't need validation along the way. They're not withholding their goals out of insecurity. They're protecting them, the same way you'd protect a young seedling from a harsh frost before it's strong enough to survive on its own. And when the work is finally done, when the results are finally visible, they carry a weight that no amount of talking about it in advance ever could have created. People don't remember what you said you were going to do. They remember what you actually did. So here's the honest, slightly uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all 7 of these habits. None of them are complicated. You didn't need a video to tell you that reading is good for you, or that writing down your goals helps, or that discipline matters, or that guarding your time and your attitude and your gratitude and your focus all contribute to a better life. You already knew all of that, on some level, before you clicked play. So why doesn't knowing it translate into doing it? This is the real gap, and it's the reason so many people stay exactly where they are for years, sometimes for their entire lives, even though they know, deep down, exactly what they should be doing. The gap between knowing and doing is where dreams quietly go to die. It's not a dramatic collapse. There's no single moment where someone decides to give up on the life they wanted. It's much quieter and much sadder than that. It's 1,000 small decisions to put it off until tomorrow. It's the comfort of staying exactly where you are. Because change, even good change, requires a kind of friction that our brains are wired to avoid. It's the distraction of a culture that tends us instant entertainment, instant approval, instant gratification at every possible turn, making the slow, unglamorous work of daily habits feel almost unbearably boring by comparison. And here's the trap hiding inside that boredom. These habits don't reward you immediately. Reading one book won't transform your life. Writing down one goal won't make it happen. Being disciplined for one day won't build the future you're picturing. Each individual action on its own feels almost pointless. And that's exactly why most people quit before the compounding effect ever has the chance to kick in. They're planting seeds and then digging them up every few days to check if they've grown yet. And in doing so, they never give them the chance to actually take root. But think about what's actually at stake here. Because this isn't just about productivity tips or self-improvement for its own sake. Think about what these 7 habits mean for the people around you, not just for yourself. When you build the habit of daily learning, you become someone your children can look up to, someone whose curiosity and growth become the standard in your household instead of the exception. When you build the habit of clear goals, you stop drifting through decades of your life wondering where the time went, and you start actually arriving somewhere on purpose. When you build daily discipline, you become someone people can rely on, someone whose word actually means something because your actions consistently back it up. When you guard your time and your attitude, you become the kind of person others want to be around, the kind of person who lifts a room instead of draining it. When you practice daily gratitude, you build a kind of resilience that carries you through hard seasons without breaking. And when you learn to work quietly and let your results speak, you build a quiet, unshakable confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval to keep moving forward. Zoom out far enough, and these 7 small daily habits aren't really about productivity at all. They're about the kind of person you become over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and the kind of life that person gets to build, not just for themselves, but for everyone connected to them. If you're wondering whether any of this is actually backed by more than just motivational stories, it is. Researchers who study behavior change have found, again and again, that habits form through repetition in a consistent context, not through sheer willpower alone, which is exactly why starting small and staying consistent works so much better than trying to overhaul your entire life overnight. Studies on habit formation have shown it typically takes somewhere around 2 to 3 months of consistent repetition before a new behavior starts to feel automatic rather than effortful, which explains why so many people give up in that difficult middle stretch right before the habit would have become easy. Understanding this alone can be the difference between quitting in week 3, convinced that something is wrong with you, and pushing through, understanding that the discomfort you're feeling is simply part of the process. Every single person who has ever built a lasting habit has had to move through. So here's where that leaves you. 7 habits. None of them flashy, none of them requiring some special talent you don't already have access to. Daily learning, clear written goals, consistent discipline, guarded time, a guarded attitude, daily gratitude, and the quiet confidence to work before you talk. The extraordinary people you admire, the ones whose lives look so different from where you're standing right now, didn't start with some advantage you don't have. In almost every case, they started exactly where you are. And the only difference is they picked 1 or 2 of these habits, small as they seemed, and they stuck with them long enough for the compounding to kick in. That's genuinely the whole secret, and it's been sitting in plain sight this entire time. So here's the challenge. Not for next month, not for New Year's, but for today. Pick just one of these 7 habits, the one that speaks to you the most right now, and commit to it for the next 30 days. Not perfectly, just consistently. Write it down somewhere you'll see it every day, and then quietly, without announcing it to the world, without waiting for permission or the perfect moment, get to work. If this video gave you something worth carrying into your day, take a second to hit that subscribe button, because there's a lot more of this ahead, and I'd genuinely love to have you here for it. Your life isn't going to change because of one video or one motivational quote, or one burst of inspiration that fades by tomorrow afternoon. It's going to change because of what you choose to do differently, starting today, and then again tomorrow, and then again the day after that, quietly, consistently, with pot, until one day you look back and realize you're simply not the same person you used to be. That's how ordinary becomes extraordinary. Not all at once, one disciplined day at a time.